So welcome to whatever this is, not a podcast because I don't have one. Not exactly sure why I'm doing this, but we're going to go over a little bit of the season preview for the Boston Red Sox today. Let's get started with the obvious. The end of the offseason is coming around. We are in spring training. Today is a great day to be a Red Sox fan. I just watched Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell, and Roman Anthony hit tanks, not cheap shots at all, in the spring breakout game. We'll get to them later. This is a team that can definitely win the division this year. They are probably a top 5 team in the AL at a minimum. Definitely could be more like 2 or 3. As a fan, it's been a few years here of not great. They finally made some moves, and first we'll go over a bit of the offseason. Obviously the major offseason moves, trading for Garrett Crochet, either one, and also obviously signing Alex Bregman. I will go and preface by saying that I was not a fan of either move at the time. I'm not an Alex Bregman guy. It might just be because he's a cheater, but he's on the team now. Wasn't a huge fan of the signing. I didn't think they needed him. I'm a fan of the young guys. I'd rather let some young guys play, but now that it's kind of settled in a little bit, I know he's got great numbers at Fenway. If you haven't seen, his OPS is way over 1,000 at Fenway, but it ended up looking like it's going to be a good signing, and he plays great defense. He was a Gold Glover at third base last year, so excited for him. Crochet is a bit of an interesting case. At first, I do think they gave up a lot. They gave up Brendan Montgomery, who is a top 100 prospect, first-round pick last year, good player, and was injured, so you really didn't even get to see what he might have brought to the table. Chase Medroth, good, solid organization pitcher. Obviously, the big piece was Kyle Teal, left-handed catcher, top 30 prospect in baseball. It's clear now that they gave up the right prospect, right? Campbell is soaring, and at the time, for a long time, if you're not a Red Sox fan, you might not know, but Teal, Anthony, and Meyer were the big 3. Not Campbell, but Campbell, again, we'll get more into the prospects a little later. Minor league hitter of the year last year, or player of the year. Unbelievable. So let's get into a bit of the lineup. We're going to go down the dog. We're going to start with a lineup. Then we're going to get to the rotation, a little bit about the bullpen prospects, a little bit about the rest of the division, and maybe a little bit of the future later. First, we'll start with the top dogs. Obviously, the top dog in Boston as a hitter is Rafi Devers. He is a stud. Obviously, the question is, where will he play? Will he play third? Will he play DH? Honestly, I'm kind of tired of hearing of it. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I don't really understand why there's so much discourse. He came out today and said that he'll play whatever, which is basically what I expected. He's not a great defender. His outs above average is not good. His D-WAR is not good. I don't know. When I watch it, from an actual viewing standpoint, I think it's better than it looks. Not by much. I'm not saying he's like a fantastic third baseman, but he makes some great plays. I don't think it's like that he can't do it. He's shown the ability to field at a high level, just not consistently. I'm looking, his range is -6, his outs above average, which is in the 8th, that's not good at all. Realistically, I think he plays some third. I think he plays some DH. I would like to. We'll see what happens with Tristan Casas, but there's going to be odd men. There's going to be a few odd men out after the season, during the season. There's just too many hitters. It's a luxury and it's a great problem to have. But if you look, let's say 10 hitters, this team has more than 10 hitters, especially if you include the prospects, who will probably be up by the end of the year. Their lineup is solid. And they have a good bench, which we will talk about. I really like the bench of the Red Sox this year. I think having a good bench is way more important than people think, and I think that having a manager that knows how to use the bench, like Alex Cora, is really important. They won games last year because of how they used their bench, and you look at a team like the Yankees, who I'm sure I'll throw more shade out later, did not have the bench last year, and it cost them. Having a guy like DJ LeMahieu just be useless, It hurt not having anyone to pitch hit ever. I think it's important now. I would argue that the reason that the Yankees didn't have that is because they had a way better lineup than we did last year. But regardless, so for Devers, again, we could maybe touch on that when we talk about the defense a little later. He's your guy. I see him playing a decent amount of third this season. The real question will be, how does he feel about playing DH? Do his stats, I'm not a professional baseball player, but from what I understand, there's, baseball players are obviously weird, and there's a lot to do with rhythm. If he doesn't like having 4 bats and going and sitting down every night, there's guys who, if you look, I've done some research that when they either just DH when they're a position player or they play different positions, they don't hit as well when they play the other positions. And you know what? He's your best hitter. He should be playing, unless his defense is egregious, I'd rather him be where he's comfortable. Now, his numbers, his OPS is only about 20 points less when he DHs, not enough to be statistically significant or anything like that. So we'll see how the season goes. Everyone's like, oh, Bregman should play third, Christian Campbell should play second, but I think the real question will move to him next in the lineup. That is not really, I guess if you're not a Red Sox fan, maybe he doesn't come off as the most important guy, is Masataka Yoshida, who they signed the season before to a $90 million contract, 4 years. He hasn't really made a name for himself, but he's been pretty solid. The MLB is a completely different level of hitting than Japan. So he came over, he took a little bit to get adjusted. He finally got adjusted. Season ended, came back, he was injured. He was injured most of last year. He had a shoulder problem, and as soon as he kind of figured it out and he healed, gave him a couple months, he started to look good. So his hitting stats aren't unbelievable. He does not strike out. He does not whiff. His chase rate is pretty good, and really the issue last year was his ground ball rate was way too high. Way too high. He's slow and he can't play defense, which is a whole nother problem, but as a hitter, if he is on, he's a guy I want in my lineup. I want him up, right? He puts the ball in play. This is a team that's going to need guys to put balls in play. I mean, they have power on the lineup. They don't, it's not like they need a guy to hit 30 home runs, I think, in that DH spot. So I like Yoshida. I think he absolutely deserves the season to see if he can kind of play out to what they were hoping him to be. I think they thought he'd be a better fielder. I mean, me too. I didn't realize that he was, legit 45 years old when he plays the outfield. He can't run, but such is life. But he's a good hitter. I think he deserves the spot. And you kick him out of his spot, he's not good enough to play. He cannot play the outfield. And as we'll get to probably very shortly, the outfield is crowded. It is crowded. There is no room for Yoshida. There's no room for even the guys that are starting. So when you look at the lineup, again, so Devers, Yoshida, if we go just to take a little bit of a more general look, today Cora did say he thinks the lineup's going to be Duran, Devers, Bregman, then Casas, having Bregman separate Devers and Casas. He thinks it gives them a good look, which I don't know that I have a problem with. Bregman does hit really good out of the 2 spot historically. I would not mind having him at the 2 spot, but I do understand the reasoning. I mean, they could move him around. Devers has hit all of those spots. So is Bregman. Duran is your leadoff guy for sure. I think the top of that lineup, it's pretty dang good. And I honestly think for a long time, as a fan, maybe because I'm more of a hypercritical fan than one of those optimistic fans, I didn't think this lineup was that good. I don't think I thought Bregman was as good as he is. He did have a down year last year. I do want to, before ever, if you go online, you look at Bregman, oh, the monster, he loves the monster, because he's going crazy in spring training. I got to see it. He regressed last year as a hitter. His defense was as good as ever, but we have him playing second base, so that should not be the reason that you're an everyday second baseman, is because, his defense is really good. So we'll see. I'm optimistic. I'm hoping he has a great year. We'll let him get rolling and see what happens with Bregman. Devers, we discussed. Jarren Duran is a very interesting player, and I think if you're not a Red Sox fan, he's probably a bit of kind of who is this guy? Obviously, you know who he is, but what's his deal? I mean, he had 14 triples last year, 48 doubles. Unbelievable. 8-7 WAR. 8-7 WAR is crazy. In most years, if you do cross-check, he'd be MVP 4 or higher. So he was MVP 8 last year, which, first of all, MVP 8 is still really good. You look at who was ahead of him. Well, Skubal, Cy Young. Vlad, who had an unbelievable season last year. Jose Ramirez, 1 home run off 40-40, I believe. Gunnar, Soto, Witt, and Judge, all who had just unbelievable. I mean, you're not going to, any other year, Soto, Witt, or Judge would have won MVP. It's possible Jose Ramirez, too, or even Vlad. I mean, these guys were studs. Vlad had a 6.2 WAR last year, not playing great defense. And Jose Ramirez almost 7. Gunnar had a 9 WAR. I mean, it's really, really impressive. The AL last year really put up some numbers. So, Jarren Duran, do I think he replicates? No. No, I do not. A 9-war season, if you look at the amount of guys that ever have a 9-war season, it's not many. So, what's the deal with Duran? He plays great defense. His arm, he was number 1 in outfield assists, I believe. I think he had 11, if I remember correctly. He can throw guys out. He's going to be playing left field, a little bit easier than center. He's fast as hell, and that doesn't go away, right? The arm and the fielding will stay. So at that point, your ceiling already is pretty high as a defender. He's made big strides. If you guys remember when he came up, it was not pretty in the outfield. But he's not going to have to play center. As a hitter, he was good last year. I mean, he was really, really good. He got caught stealing a lot, but he steals a lot of bases. He had a 285 batting average, 492 slug, pretty good for a leadoff center fielder. His advanced numbers are all through the roof. I mean, he's 96th percentile in sprint speed, 95th in range, 96th in batting, 98th in running, and 93rd in fielding. I mean, he's a stud. He's an absolute stud. And if he can be what he was last year, to even a little bit, right? He's not going to be, if he's another 9-war season, he starts to become one of the better players in baseball, right? Automatically. I don't think that happens. I think he'll regress. It's unsustainable. If he's a 6-war player, a 5-war player, he's a great leadoff hitter. He's a great player. It'll make this lineup dynamic as ever, and I hope we see it. So Duran, we'll have to see. I'm very excited to watch him play this year. It was a lot of fun last year. The guy does not look, I mean, he's jacked, but he doesn't really look like the type of guy, but he had 21 homers last year at the leadoff spot. Very impressive. Duran's going to be playing left. So who's going to be playing the other 2 outfield spots? This is where it gets interesting. So Ceddanne Rafaela is going to be the everyday center fielder. From what I've seen, he's a Gold Glove level fielder. I cannot necessarily corroborate that with evidence, and it's tough because most of his numbers are based on his shortstop play, because he played both last season. He was not a very good shortstop, but he's not a shortstop. The fact that he was playing shortstop is ridiculous. He's actually technically, it says here that he's a shortstop because of how many games he played at shortstop. So whatever, he's got 94th in arm strength, 94th percentile. He is amazing in center fielder, and the dude is a rookie. Let him play a position every day instead of having him switch every other day. I really do think that makes a difference. He's going to be your 9-hitter every day. I mean, I hate to say it. I'm getting more optimistic. This is a guy, of all the guys that, I wasn't super... There's a lot of guys on the Red Sox this year that I think people are all over, that I had a lot of question marks. I still do, and I'm hoping I'm proven wrong. But Crochet, Bregman, Casas, Yoshida, all are, despite possibly being really good, have huge question marks. This guy, who everyone is hating on, and all the Red Sox fans, he should be traded. He played one season basically, and he played every day. The problem with him, his whiff and chase rate is horrendous. He chases like I've never seen in my entire life. His chase rate is actually first percentile. He chases 50% of the time, 46% to be exact. He doesn't walk. So when you don't walk and you strike out all the time, if you're not putting the ball in play, which he's not, it's a bit problematic. But let him, it's only year 1. He was still like a decent baseball player last year. So I want to see him. He had almost 3 WAR. And his WAR was shit defensively because he was playing shortstop, which he was not good at. So we'll see. In right field, it's going to be Will Abreu. And I think, as a Red Sox fan, you should be cautiously excited about Will Abreu. He, I believe, won the Gold Glove, if I'm not completely mistaken, and played fantastic defense. His defensive metrics are out of this world. He hits the ball hard, 95. He's 95th percentile hard hit percentage, 50%. I mean, it's really good, and his average exit velo is 91, which is way above league average. I believe that's close to the 90th percentile. So he is a player. The problem is he doesn't hit lefties. So he didn't really hit lefties in the minors too well, and last year, I don't have it in front of me. I believe he batted 180 off lefties with bad OPS, bad slugging. So he's got to prove he can hit lefties. Again, he played 1 season. So I am by no means out on him, and he's an excellent defender. It's one of those things. It's like Rafaela. Let's see it. If Rafaela and Abreu, we finish this year or the upcoming season, and he still can't hit lefties, and Rafaela still is striking out half the time, it's a problem. It's a problem, and the issue for them, not even for us, is that there's guys right behind him. So these are guys, Willie Abreu and Stan Rafaela, that I think you can look back in 5 years and say, wow, look at that. Wow, they really turned out. Or the opposite. I do think that one of these guys could be traded by the beginning of next season, for sure. I think more Abreu, more likely. They already paid Rafaela. And Abreu's ceiling with his defense, I think there's teams that would. I mean, they didn't ship him for Luis Castillo. They offered and they declined for Luis Castillo, Willie Abreu. And I personally don't think Luis Castillo was worth that. But if you're an average fan, I mean, you'd probably be like, Willie Abreu for Luis Castillo? Like, that's a deal. The issue is that Roman Anthony's knocking on the door, who, again, we will get to. I don't want to talk about the prospects too early, but when you have him knocking on the door, you now have 4 center fielders for 3 spots. And I'm not sure what they're going to do about that. This guy is too good to just sit in the minors. He's not going to be another, the Yankees had Clint Frazier, who kind of was stuck down there because the Yankees were good every year and they had good players and there was just no room for him. And I'm not saying he would have been good if he came up. He obviously ended up being a pretty bad bust. But for years, it was like, when's this guy going to come up? You almost felt bad for the guy just sitting in the minor leagues, and I think Anthony is too good for that. Don't make that mistake. Let him come up. If he's as good as he's advertised to be, then there is no reason to worry about like a Willie Abreu or Stan Rafaela. Yes, they're amazing. This guy is the number 1 prospect in baseball, number 2, whatever, Sasaki. So we'll see what happens with that. I don't know how long they're going to be able to keep him down. I mean, he just hit an absolute tank. And we'll see. But the defense, the issue for the Red Sox last year, they were top 5 or 10 in hitting stats last year. The pitching was top 10 in WHIP and ERA, starter ERA. The bullpen was not great. But the defense was so bad, they actually lost games. They lost games to the defense. I have not seen a defense that bad in a long time, to be honest with you. And the defense is going to be better. Rafaela is going to be playing good defense. Abreu and Durant, I mean, that's a really good defensive outfield. You pair that with Bregman, and we'll see what Christian Campbell can do. Story's back. They really might have a good defense this year, and it would make a huge, huge difference. Okay? We'll see what happens. I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but I think it'll be much improved. If we're moving to the infield, we talked about Devers. Story is very interesting, but the problem with shortstop, the reason why I'm not going to spend too much time on it, is it's really just him. They don't have anyone else. So he's coming off injury. He barely has played since, as everyone knows, he hasn't been healthy, but he's looked good in spring training. I wish him the best because he's a good dude, and it's a shame that he hasn't been able to play baseball. But he's got to stay healthy. If he doesn't, they have issues because then Meyer has to come up, or they're gonna make. I don't know what they're gonna do at short. They don't really have options. They're backup guys like Bregman. You have David Hamilton, who we'll get to. Even Rafael. Like, they're not really meant to be playing short. They could play third, they could play second, but I don't think they're meant to be playing short. I think then you're forcing Meyer to come up. Who, he might be ready. I believe his OPS is over 1,000 in the spring, so he might be ready. But Meyer hasn't stayed healthy either in the minor leagues. I'm not going to label him injury prone. He's only like 24 years old, but it's a question mark. And we got to see it from Story. There's really nothing to talk about. He's played such little baseball that there's really, but when he played, he's been excellent defensively. We'll have to see if the hitting continues, if he can stay healthy. Bregman at second. It's tough to talk about second without talking about the prospect Christian Campbell. We'll see. I think he's trending towards being on the roster, but I'm just not sure what they're going to do. There's just no space. And people keep saying, just move Bregman to third. Okay, let's say you move Bregman to third and you move Campbell to second, assuming that he's ready and he's good enough defensively, which is the question mark right now. Can he play Major League second base defensively? Yoshida is what? He's a bench player? I mean, you're paying him way too much money to be a bench player, and I just don't think that I would take Campbell right now. He's played 1 season of minor league baseball. His rise is unbelievable. If anyone for some reason is watching this and is listening and is unfamiliar with Christian Campbell, he was a pick out of Georgia Tech, was not considered to be like a highly rated guy at Georgia Tech. He had some tools, but he didn't hit. He did not hit and he didn't steal bases. His hitting stance wasn't great. And he didn't have any. I mean, he hit like 9 home runs in all of college. Right? 9 home runs. He hit 20 last year in the minor leagues. He went from single A to triple A. He was the minor league hitter of the year, player of the year, hitter of the year. I think that might be the same thing. He was unbelievable. He's only getting better. His launch angles are excellent. His exit velo is excellent. His bat speed's up. And there's GMs who have said they think he's the best of the 3. I'm not going to say that. I actually don't think that's true. But it just doesn't even seem right. Like, how is this kid so good already? I would let him sit for a little bit, but we'll see how he does. First is going to be Tristan Casas. Again, there's really not too much to say about him because the question is, so he hasn't had a full season. He's been very good. If he stays healthy if you told me right now he's going to be healthy all season, he's 25 homers. I don't think people who don't really know him don't realize that he's really a power guy. Like, he's a little bit less of a Pete Alonso power guy. I mean, he's not going to put up 40, I don't think. 30 is not out of the question by any means. By any means. He's got, when he was in the minors, he's in like 500-foot homers. He just hasn't stayed healthy, and he whiffs a little bit too much, but he is going to be an 800-plus OPS guy, I think, at first base. The defense is not good, and he runs like he's 95 years old, but that's kind of what you get with a big second baseman who's 250 pounds. I think that of all the guys, the guy that could shock the most is Casas. If he is healthy, I think he could have a monster season. He hasn't been healthy. He's been good, and he hasn't really gotten the chance to even settle in. So we'll have to see. Catcher is a problem. I was actually thinking, 2 minutes ago, I don't even know. Connor Wong's the starting guy, and he had good numbers last year. Seriously, if you told me, your catcher, he's going to have, mid-700 OPS. I believe his OPS was 750-something last year. Not bad. He batted 280. It's good. His defense is not great. He's horrible at framing. I don't, see it, but numbers-wise, he's really bad. He does not block well, and all of his hitting analytics are very low. So he's fine. He's fine for right now, and if that's the weak spot of your lineup, that's okay. They're not going to be perfect. The problem with Wong is I just don't really know what the plan is because they traded Teal, and they don't really have guys behind Wong. They signed and traded. They traded for this guy Carlos Narvaez from the Yankees, who I transparently know not much about. They also have another catcher in the system that they picked up somewhere who I'm also not super familiar with. The one guy that I think could be sneaky, and I haven't seen anyone even mention this guy's name on anything, is this guy named Mickey Gasper, who, if you remember from last year, he came up and he basically couldn't get a hit. It was kind of funny. He went 0 for 30. But it wasn't his fault. He just kept lining out, grounding out. So he came up last year, and he had a 1,000 OPS in the minor leagues as a catcher in AAA, if I'm not mistaken. He, I think, could be decent this year. He wasn't great. What's funny is I see that he's on the Twins. All right. I was not informed of that, so disregard that. But he's a good minor league hitter. I'd love to see if he ever comes up. The problem is he's already 29 years old. But regardless, so we'll move off Gasper. So Rafaela, Duran, Abreu is going to be in the outfield. So for catcher, again, we'll figure it out. I'd like to stop just recapping the lineup and move on here. So the next thing I do want to talk about is, so we talked a little about the lineup structure. I do think it's fairly obvious that those guys are going to be on top, and you'll have some combination of Rafaela and Wong and some of the other guys at the bottom. The potential of this lineup is to be one of the best lineups in baseball. If these guys all pan out, which will not happen because it never does, and they all stay healthy, which will not happen because it never does, you think of a good year from Bregman, a good year from Devers, a good year from Duran with Casas, maybe the prospect coming up, even without the prospects coming up. If Story can bounce back, it's a dangerous lineup. It's very dangerous. And if their weakest link is Connor Wong and Rafaela, I'll take that. I think that is not at all a bad any problem to have. They need to stay healthy because they have depth at certain positions. Where they don't have depth, as I mentioned, is shortstop. So Story staying healthy is important. They also don't really have depth at first base. If something happens to Casas, it's going to be Romy Gonzalez, who was okay last year. I do not want him as my starting first baseman. And as I kind of mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the depth pieces. Not too much because to almost everyone they're irrelevant. So who's going to be on your bench? You got Carlos Narvaez, who I think will be the backup catcher. I'm laughing that I thought Mickey was still on the team. Romy Gonzalez, who is a very much fine utility backup player. He plays first, he plays second, he hits lefties fairly well. He was not bad last year. He was okay. David Hamilton. Big fan of David Hamilton. Second baseman, lefty, young. He's like only 26 or 27. He was pretty good last year in limited action. I'm a fan of his. Just watching him play, he's wickedly fast. Wickedly fast. He plays decent defense. I really liked him last year and was hoping. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of room for him up here. And if he doesn't ball out, I don't even think there's room for him at second. Like, again, it's one of those guys where I guess the real hope is that if he plays well, you can trade him. But he was fun to watch. He's very fast. I enjoy watching David Hamilton. I love him as a bench piece, right? Aside from starting. If he's just a bench guy for us for a while, that's great. I mean, I got no complaints with that. Vaughn Grisham, it almost hurts to talk about. If you don't know, Vaughn Grisham was traded straight up for the NL Cy Young winner, Chris Sale, last year, which is just wonderful front office work. Grisham he was the top Braves prospect, or one of the top Braves prospect, one of the touchable ones. That I think the guys, they weren't going to trade their top guys, but he was movable. I remember when he came up, it was a big deal. He got hurt, had a very down year the year before last year when he was a Brave, but he was super injured. Could not sail. He was getting hurt like every other week. So, okay, ship him for Chris Sale. And guess what? He was bad last year. He didn't stay healthy. He batted 190 in 105 plate appearances. And there's just no room for him. I'd love to give him a shot, but he hasn't been good, and there's no room. So I would say his time on the Red Sox might be short, unfortunately for him. Nick Sogard is a switch-hitting infield, outfield piece. I'm not informed enough about him to give extensive commentary, but I think he's a solid piece, and I enjoyed having him last year. So we're going to move on from these hitters, and we're going to talk about some pitching since we're already 27 minutes in. Let's talk about the rotation. Okay, who is the rotation? Right now, it's Garrett, Crochet, it's Tanner Houck, it's Walker Buehler, and 4 and 5, I don't know. We got some injuries. Right now, Dick Fitz is looking like he's going to fit in there. What a fantastic name. In terms of injuries, let's talk about the injured guys, and then we'll go to the guys that are healthy. This is a rotation that looks like it could be like 7 guys. Okay, we got Patty Sandoval from the Angels, signed a 2-year, $18 million contract. Few years removed from being good, but there is a shot that he continues to be as good as he was. He's a 6-pitch pitcher, pretty rare. He throws a curve, a sweeper, a slider, I don't have it in front of me, a sinker, a four-seam, something like that. I believe those are all pitches he throws, and he throws one more, I think a change-up. The fastball got destroyed last year, and the year before, sort of. The year before that, though, he had a 2.9 ERA in 29 starts. So I'm not saying he's going to flash back or anything, but as a depth starter, I actually really like it. If he could figure out the fastball a little bit, you never know. Giolito is on the IL, per usual. Has not pitched, not a great signing. They paid him a decent amount of money to not pitch. He strained his hamstring today, apparently, even though he said he was fine. That's another. I really don't have high expectations for him. He'll be a rotation piece, and he'll get his shot. I don't have high expectations. I think he's really going to be the odd man out. Cutter Crawford also could be the odd man out. Has some knee soreness. He's starting on the IL. Interesting because his numbers aren't great. His underlying numbers are not great. However, he got killed by home runs last year. I believe he gave up the highest ratio of home runs, or like home runs per at bat, of any pitcher ever. So, it's concerning, but the fact that he was still okay stat-wise, giving up tank after tank after tank, tells me that maybe there's a way, he was throwing, I don't know the exact numbers, but the amount of pitches that he left right over the center was like more than any pitcher in baseball. And the amount of times that he got burned on a fastball over the middle, right in the center, was more than any pitcher in baseball. So he was throwing them down the middle, and they were getting destroyed. I mean, these balls were going to the moon. So we'll see what happens, what's in store for Cutter Crawford this year. Brian Bayo is very interesting because going into last year, the hype on him was like top prospect hype before all these guys were coming up. And he was okay last year, very inconsistent. It seemed he would get frustrated on the mound, and when he was frustrated, He didn't pitch really well, so it's a bit confusing in terms of what do we think we're going to get out of Brayan Bello this year. There is high expectations for Brayan Bello, I will say. He's the 5th starter right now, okay? So he's not by any means, he's not a 1, anything like that. But they need him to be good. And with all these question marks, Giolito is a question mark. Cutter Crawford is a question mark. I'm not exactly sure that they can afford for him to just be bad. His advanced numbers last year were not good at all. There's one thing I will say, and this applies to every single pitcher on the staff. He throws a sinker a lot, okay? He uses it 40% of the time. This defense was horrible last year. They were ass. So these sinker pitchers should get a boost from being behind a good defense. It sounds minuscule, but it's almost not. In terms of a sinker pitcher needs a good defense, and we just did not have any defense last year, as we've discussed. So hoping that that'll help Brayan Bello out a lot. And there's some other pitchers. Sandoval's main fastball is a sinker. It's not a fastball. He throws both, but you got sinker guys. Tanner Houck, sinker guy, had a great year last year. Fantastic year from Tanner Houck. His advanced numbers were fantastic. He fell off a little bit, but it was his first season as a big league starting pitcher. He had obviously been a pen guy. He was an all-star, and I don't really see him taking a step forward. But if he stays where he is, he's a very, very solid rotation piece that could be on the Red Sox rotation for years to come. That slider is disgusting. It is one of the best pitches in the sport. It's not a Japanese splitter, unfortunately, like the rest of them have, but his slider, it's a frisbee. When he was pitching in relief, he'd come in, and there was guys looking at him. What did you just throw? I remember guys saying, what did you just throw? Was that a frisbee? And as a starter, that's dangerous, having something like that, just a wipe-out, strikeout pitch. Very, very interested to see how he performs this year, because I think he'll regress. I hope I'm wrong, but I think he'll regress. And if he does, number 2 in the rotation is a bit of a, let's see. Walker Buehler, 1 year, 20 points, trying to remember, 1.5 million, something like that, 2.5. I don't hate the signing, right? It's a 1-year contract. It's an upside play. It's kind of hard for me to say, oh, he was a bad signing. I do think the hype is a little, I think people don't realize that he was not good. He really had a good playoff run, and he had a good World Series. But he was not good before that, and he's been really banged up. This is a guy that I wouldn't have high expectations for, and where you start to run into question marks is the Red Sox seem to have a really deep starting rotation, and they do. But is Walker Buehler going to pitch the whole season? Is he going to be good? They don't really, I guess they have a lot of backups, but these guys are real question marks. If Walker Buehler comes out and shoves, great. But I don't know that there's any guarantee. Dick Fitz, who's their 5th starter, Richard Fitz, if you're not familiar, traded from the Yankees. He's been good. He was good last year. His first 2 starts didn't give up a run. So, maybe he works his way. And he's going to get to start the season in the rotation. So if he's really good, their core is going to have to do some shuffling, right? That's his job. So we'll see. The injuries are concerning. Don't forget, Andrew Bailey came over as the pitching coach with our new GM, Chris Breslow. Or I guess he's not new anymore, but was new. And Andrew Bailey, very good reputation. One of the best pitching coaches in the league. And when we brought him over, it was kind of a big deal because the Red Sox pitching had been egregious. So if we take one step back and look at the pitching going into last year, this is something I haven't really heard people talk about. The rotation and the bullpen was expected to be garbage, okay? It was expected to be garbage. Houck was good. He was an all-star. Brayan Bello was not great, but he was okay. Nick Pivetta struck out a lot of guys, not terrible. They were an 81-win team, but the starting pitching was really not the reason. It wasn't great, but it really wasn't the reason. You look at, so I'm looking at Cutter Crawford's stats last year. He had 16 losses, 9-16, not good. He gave up 34 homers, which is a crazy number. That is wild. For comparison, Tanner Houck, who threw basically the same amount of innings, gave up 11. But Cutter Crawford struck out 175 guys. Not bad. His ERA plus was 98, which isn't fantastic, but again, it's Like, his advanced numbers aren't good, but I have hope. And you got to give some credit to Andrew Bailey. These guys out of the bullpen last year were not good, but there's some guys that I think can be good. I mean, Chris Martin was good. Garrett Whitlock was hurt. We'll have to see what comes of maybe Quinn Priester, which, if you don't, he was a top prospect for the Pirates, traded for him at the deadline last year. We'll have to see, but like Brennan Bernardino had a not great year last year, but these guys are serviceable. And Zach Kelly and Greg Weissert and Justin Slayton are guys that I think can be impact guys. I do. To finish up and dive into the back, I don't say finish up, but the back end of the bullpen here, the real headline, okay, is the old heads. That's what it is. It's the old heads. You have Liam Hendricks. You have Aroldis Chapman. Very strange domestic abuser and touches his mother, but I personally not a fan, but he's on the team. Michael Fulmer, who was if you remember, Rookie of the Year a few years ago. I don't know where he came from. These guys, I don't have a lot of confidence in. Liam Hendricks has been out for 2 seasons. In spring training, he's getting lit up like fireworks. And Chapman is 37 years old. Hendricks is 36. If these guys aren't good, you have an issue on the back end. If they are bad, I'm not saying like they're okay, but if they're really inconsistent, you can't trust them. We got issues. I mean, Greg Weissert was okay last year at a 4 ERA, and as you know, he's got that wicked wipeout sweeper. He's looked good in spring training. He has looked really good, actually. And again, I give these guys some time with the pitching coach. Whitlock will be back when he's on. He's nasty. I think Slayton is the closer. I'm going to come back to this, and not that anyone's listening, but I think mid-year you could come look at this and say, oh, wow. Everyone's saying that, because everyone's saying it's going to be Hendricks, it's going to be Chapman. I think it's going to be Slayton. I don't even understand why. I don't think it's that crazy of a thing. I'd actually be surprised if the season doesn't start as Slayton, unless they give it to Chapman because he was a closer. And I'd let Slayton roll with it from the start. I'd let those Hendricks and Chapman be leverage guys. Justin Wilson came over as a free agent from Cincinnati last year, has been very mediocre his whole career, former Pirate, former Red. I believe he was a Met for a little while. And then Bernardino, 3.95 last year. He's good against lefties. He was just super inconsistent last year to a point where it was almost painful. He would, if you don't know Brennan Bernardino, I don't know why you would. He's got a weird arm angle, so he misses some bats. His arm angle is about 18 degrees, which is very strange. See if he can miss some more bats this year. Didn't do enough of it. And let's just quickly dive into these random group of guys that might be in the bullpen. You have Adamant Avino, minor league contract. Matt Moore, who I don't say famously got traded from the Angels at the deadline when they were already out of the playoffs, and they cut him because they didn't want to pay him because they're the worst run organization possibly in the sport. Head to Oakland. Austin Adams, San Diego, Oakland. Another guy that's really like a 2-pitch, 4-seam slider guy. I don't really ever remember him being good, so I don't know. I don't have high expectations. Sean Newcomb, a lefty from the Braves that they signed. I don't think he's been on the Braves for years. Wash starter. Again, these guys are all guys that I don't have a lot of confidence in. The reason why the bullpen worry me less is not because it's not important, but if you get to the break and they're not good, okay, that is a position. It is the easiest position to address via trade. The Red Sox have a great farm system. They can trade prospects 8 and 14 for good relievers. If they're really good, maybe they'll ship off a decent prospect and get a real good closer. So you look around the MLB off the top of my head, who's a good closer on a bad team? Alexis Diaz, welcome, seems to be running out a little bit in Cincinnati. Was not as good last year. How about Ryan Helsley? Amazing last year. St. Louis they got to rebuild. St. Louis has some good young guys. J.J. Weatherhold's having a fantastic spring. And Mason Wynn is looking like he's going to be a really good baseball player. I actually think Mason Wynn, if you're in fantasy baseball, deep league, could be really good if he gets his power up a little bit. They need to rebuild. Arenado should not be on that team. So maybe they send Helsley out. I don't know that I think that's such a crazy take. we'll wait. We'll see. Hopefully the bullpen's good enough. These guys who are not major names, like Justin Slayton, I think Justin Slayton is the most important guy for the bullpen this year. If he's really good, it's huge. If he's not, I don't really know. I have a little too much faith in him to be good this season. And we'll have to see with him. I mean, again, the bullpen's a bit questionable. Nothing new. Also, one thing I will randomly throw out is they traded for Blake Sable in January, who is a catcher from the San Francisco Giants. I know very little about him outside of just like his name. But just another guy to watch out for. I haven't heard a peep about. That backup catcher spot is up for grabs. It is 100% up for grabs, and he is most certainly better defensively. He is as a hitter, he's had issues. He's actually, fun fact, he strikes out 34% of the time. He got it down to 23 last year, but still not great. So we'll see on him. Moving on, we're going to talk some prospects. Going to try not to rant or anything. Let's keep it nice and concise. The Red Sox are the number 3 farm system in baseball. They have studs up and down. Let's start very, very quickly with the guys. So everyone knows there's the big 3. It's Christian Campbell, it's Marcelo Meyer, and it's Roman Anthony. Those guys are studs. They will all be in the MLB shortly. We could talk a little bit. I don't know that anyone actually cares about the lower ranked prospects. The only other guys that really I think are worth noting is you have Yoeilin Cespedes, which if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to double check right now, might be related to, I think he's Yoenis' brother. Hit 319 in single A last year, 615 slug, pretty good. I could definitely see he's basically played good defense, hit decently. I don't need to go too deep. Miguel Belias, he's not going to be up for another 2 years. He's only 21 years old in Double A. Not too bad last year. Good defensive prospect that I could see climbing the rankings this year. Franklin Arias is the 5th ranked prospect. He is only 19. He's in complex ball, but he raked. He didn't just rake a little bit, he absolutely raked. He turns a lot of heads because his numbers were just fantastic. He's got decent, he's got average raw power and speed, but he's a very good fielder, really, really good fielder, if I'm not mistaken. And he's just got a very athletic kind of vibe to him that makes you think that guy could be a big league middle infielder, which is what he is. He's a utility guy, and again, he's very young, but his stock soared a lot last year. We'll see if he can build on that. Lastly, Luis Paredes, who is a right-hand starter that no one talks about because the Red Sox just seem to have too many prospects to keep. But he's definitely could be a mid-rotation guy. He could be a number 2 guy. He had Tommy John, unfortunately. But we'll have to see. He'll probably be back, I guess, either late this year or early next year. Just a guy name to keep an eye on. And the top 3, Marcelo, Campbell, and Roman Anthony. So, Christian Campbell, second base, left fielder. Have to see where they want to put him. He was, as I mentioned, I think 4 times now, the player of the year last year in the minor leagues. His total minor league stats, which I actually was going to look for if I could find, were sensational. He basically just kept hitting. He moved up the rankings. He's got a lot of raw power, and he is now ahead of Meyer in the rankings, which is just crazy. I believe he's the 7th ranked prospect. Last year, his cumulative stats were 330 average, 997 OPS, woo, and 20 homers for a guy that had basically hit 9 in all of college. Very impressive. He hits the ball really hard. His bat speed is better. His stance is better. He's lifting the ball more. His exit velo is way, way up. He is going to steal bags. His WRC plus 180, unbelievable. This guy's a stud. He's a stud. He's the one of the 2 that I know less. I'm not exactly sure where he'll end up. All I know is that for one, I'm just going to watch and enjoy. Marcelo Meyer is going to be next on the list. Shortstop, first-round pick, 4th overall a few years ago. They basically got lucky. He was expected to go top 3. He's been really good. His only issue has been staying healthy. He has not stayed healthy. He was the top-rated draft prospect, as I mentioned, and just kind of hasn't. He had, I think, a wrist issue, then a shoulder issue, then a back issue. He was in Double-A. He was hitting over 300 last year. He never got to play Triple-A. He's been balling in spring training. Balling. He's over 300, over 1,000 OPS. Hits fastballs really well. That's what I meant. 1,000 OPS against heaters. Everything else is under 700. And he needs to improve a bit against lefties. But he's a big dude. I think he ends up actually as a third baseman. I think in 5 years when he's up, he'll be a third baseman because he's such a big dude. He's 6'3". He got a big frame, and he seems like almost a little too big and slow to play short, but he seems like a great third baseman. Selon Meyer hit a tank today. Next, Roman Anthony. Roman Anthony is the number 2 prospect in baseball. What is he known for? If you were a random person who's watching baseball and I don't really know much about him, but he's a top prospect, why is he so good? Well, I'll give you 3 reasons. Great swing decisions. The dude just knows when to swing the bat. He doesn't chase too much. And for a guy who's a power-hitting outfielder, I mean, he could be a 300 hitter with 30 homers. That is not an exaggeration. He might lead the league. He could be a walk leader. He's like, I don't want to say Juan Soto because obviously we don't need to stretch it, but he's that kind of hitter in terms of being a power guy with good decision-making, but also hits for contact. His exit velos were unbelievable. Highest, really, of any prospect, his exit velos, which is really what boosted him up the rankings, where people were looking at this guy. He's hitting the ball hard. His swing decisions are fantastic, as I mentioned. Quick stroke, very, very decent runner. I would say he's not a good runner, but he's better than an average runner. But he'll probably end up being fairly slow, but he'll probably steal some bags. His defense, they're not really sure about. It's very, just we'll see. It's okay. This is a guy that, the question is, when do these guys come up, right? When Story gets hurt, if he gets hurt, I hope he doesn't. Marcelo's got to be called up, I assume. If anything happens in the infield, there's Campbell going to get called up. The outfield with Anthony's a bit more confusing. If Abreu hits and Rafael continues to play that defense and not just be atrocious as a hitter, Duran is locked in, Abreu's locked in. If he can hit, Abreu was absolutely locked in. He was very good last year. So what do you do? Do you put Duran in center, Roman in left, Abreu in right? Because remember, playing right field at Fenway is much harder than left. It's a bit of a question mark for me. I'm not exactly sure when they'll get called up. I think a lot of people want them called up ASAP. I'm the type of person where I don't think it's good to just hold them down. There's some teams that just don't let guys come up. Oh, they're young. Let them sit in the minors. I don't know that I think that's their idea, but that doesn't mean they need to be called up right now. All the hype, the minor league builds up prospect hype. That's what it do because people don't have anything else to do. And these guys play in spring training. Devers, for example, has not played in the spring training game for whatever reason. So if you're a fan and you're like, let me get excited about something, you're going to get excited about that. I don't know that I'd call him up for opening day. I think Campbell's got the best shot to make the lineup. I don't know exactly why that is. I think it's because he plays second base. But the way that Campbell's been rising would not shock me if he's on the opening day roster. So we've covered the lineup, the pitching, the bullpen, the prospects. Lastly, I'm going to talk a little bit about, very briefly, just based on everything I'm saying, one thing that I hope is clear is that the Red Sox future is bright. It's really an exciting time. I remember saying last year when we were in the midst of one of our losing streaks that we went on quite frequently, that this team could be a 2027 World Series champ. This offseason has solidified that more than I could have dreamed. With these prospects really turning out you really could not have asked for a better offseason and a better end of the season last year for Christian Campbell and for Roman Anthony. Marcelo, if he can stay healthy, enters that conversation as well. These guys are 3 studs. When you think of a lineup, let's say a year from today, right? Roman Anthony. Let's say a Wilyer Abreu, a Jarren Duran, a Tristan Casas. The prospects plus the guys that are on the team right now have really good potential to just form almost a fantastic squad. They're not going to be the Dodgers, but if the prospects turn out you have a team that's going to be probably the best team in the AL. If not, they're going to be one of the best teams in the AL. The last thing I do want to talk about is just this season. Let's talk a little bit about baseball, the division specifically. First, the Orioles. The Orioles staff is concerning. I'm going to try and be brief with this. It's already been 50 minutes. We'll try and wrap this up. The Orioles staff is concerning. The hitters are good. The real question is, for the hitters, is these random guys that are, prospects. They traded Colby Mayo, but Santander is good. He had like 40 homers last year, some insane number, 120 plus RBIs. They got to replace him. So is Cowser good enough to replace? I don't know. He did not play. I mean, he was good last year, but he did not play enough for me to say, oh yeah, he's going to be great. He's like a Willie Abreu, which they're very similar, actually, him and Willie Abreu, in terms of confidence in hitting. I'm a little more confident in Cowser's hitting, a little more confident in Abreu's defense, but we'll have to see on Cowser if he's going to play. O'Neill was very good for the Red Sox last year. Tyler O'Neill is the starting left fielder for the Baltimore Orioles, if you did not know. But Tyler O'Neill hit 30 tanks last year. Struck out a ton, which is what he does. Stayed healthy, which had been his problem. Earned himself a nice paycheck. Good for Tyler O'Neill, but the chance that he stays healthy and hits another 30 tanks, I'm going to take the under on that for sure. And Gunner's going to do his thing. We'll see how Jackson Holiday fares this year. But there is question marks in Baltimore. They were my pick to win the division for most of the offseason. I'd say the Red Sox are now. Of course, no bias, but genuinely, I do think they just have the best team on paper now that the Yankees are losing Garrett Cole and Giancarlo Stanton. Not going to act like I'm too upset about it, but it does stink for the Yankees. Yankees have issues. I'm not sure what that rotation is going to look like. Clark Schmidt, I think, could be good when he comes back. He was good last year, and I've been high on Clark Schmidt since he was in the minors, and I think that Clark Schmidt is someone that could be really solid for the Yankees for a few years. The problem is he's not healthy. He hasn't necessarily stayed healthy. Let's see. Let's see where he ends up. Stroman is your third starter right now. That's egregious. Anyone that's listening to this, considering that it's probably just no one, but if you're a Mets or a Yankees fan, you don't like Marcus Stroman. And third starter, not good. He's a ground ball guy. I love prime Marcus Stroman. I actually have a USA jersey, but the ground ball rate is not there anymore, and that is why he was so good, is that sinker was just, his control with the sinker was fantastic, but he doesn't have it anymore. They got Will Warren as a starter. I mean, it's a bit concerning. Carlos Carrasco, yeesh. Max Fried could be really, really good. I'm not going to act like I didn't want Max Fried. I really wanted him for the Red Sox. He was the guy that I wanted more than Crochet, which looking back seems like a ridiculous take that I was making, that you would rather have Fried. Problem with Fried is he hasn't stayed healthy. He's had elbow issues. Let's see him. When he's healthy, Fried is excellent, and I don't wish injury on him. I hope he stays healthy, and if he's healthy, he will be good. He's going to be your ace now that Garrett Cole's out. Rodon could be really good, but he concerns me. The dude's been pretty wildly inconsistent for the contract he signed. So that's your starting five. Fried, Rodon, Stroman, Schmidt, and Warren. It's not great. And they went from being a top three rotation with Garrett Cole, no doubt, to not, to put it nicely. Carlos Rodon's projected WAR is only 2.6. It's not fantastic. He hasn't been great. We'll have to see. The bullpen for the Yankees, Devin Williams is a stud. Luke Weaver, very good last year. Fernando Cruz, who they traded for in Cincinnati, I think he's a sneaky guy that most people don't really know. I think he is going to be really good this year. He was missing a lot of bats last year. I think Mark Leader Jr. bounces back. You got Cousins, Efros, and Loaizaga on the injured. I mean, Loaizaga is always on the injured list, right? I think those guys will be decent this year. I know Efros didn't have as good of a year after they traded for him in 2022. I think he'll be better, and Jake Cousins was pretty good last year, I have to say. He strained his forearm, I believe, so we'll see when he's coming back. And lastly, I did forget about Luis Heel, who was very good last year. I've been just, not to flaunt, but I've been really high on him for years. He looked great in the minors, and he came up and pitched, if any Yankee fan remembers, and just for like a little, he was just filling in, basically spot starting. He was nasty nasty. See when he's coming back. It's not soon. I don't know exactly when it is, but I think it's like not till September. Like June, I think. I think it's 3 months. So we'll see when he comes back. May, June. See how he does. Yankees have concerns. The lineup is old. It's old. I don't think Bellinger has a fantastic season. He's a good bat, no doubt. Judge is the shit. Austin Wells is going to be a fantastic catcher. Austin Wells is, in 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, I think Austin Wells is going to be considered one of the best catchers in baseball. He is fantastic defensively. He's a great bat. Good player. Goldschmidt is a dinosaur. I don't think he'll be very good this year. He was regressing heavy. Jazz Chisholm, I think, is a little overhyped. If he's healthy, he's a great player. I mean, he hasn't stayed healthy. Let him stay healthy. Let him see what he can do in that short porch. I think he could have a great year as a 5-tool guy. You just got to see it for a full season. And Volpe is really good. I think Volpe is a fantastic shortstop. I don't know why people aren't kind of like talking about him more. He's a Gold Glove level shortstop that can hit 25 homers. I mean, you don't see that every day. And Jason Dominguez, I feel like we've talked so much about Jason Dominguez. I just want to see. We'll see. I know there's concerns about his fielding, but he's an amazing hitter. He's very fast. The Martian, I mean, he's been talked about since I think he's been a prospect since before I was born. He's only 21, so 22. So let's see on him. Enough of the Yankees. The other two teams in the East are the Blue Jays and the Rays. I think the Rays are going to be decent as they always are. I think the Blue Jays are going to have a better season. I think Bo Bichette has a bounce back year. I think Vladdy is the shit. I don't think he's future Red Sox. Maybe. I think the Blue Jays are not good enough. I don't think the team is good enough to compete. I think the Red Sox can take the division. When you look at the rest of the AL Central is a bit of a mosh pit. Cleveland is not expected to compete for the title this year, but they are Cleveland, and they aren't good every year. They do have the Jose Ramirez and the Stephen Kwans. I think the Tigers and Twins are projected to be on top of that division. Neither of those teams, I mean, the Tigers are scary because they have a great farm. And if Jackson Jobe, if you're not familiar, top pitching prospect in the MLB, I believe, if he ends up being a stud, which, I mean, I don't see how he wouldn't be. He looks great. Him at school back-to-back is frightening. That is a frightening thought. Tigers have decent lineup. They got bats. They got some guys healthy. A lot of young guys that people aren't really familiar with. I think Colt Keith could have a good year. And some of those guys, it was weird. Their numbers are, like, better when they were all healthy. Like, when some guys were out, the rest of the lineup suffered, and, you know, the guys like Riley Green is an absolute stud. One of the best. Him and Jarren Duran are the best left fielders in baseball. Jarren Duran is definitely better based off last year, but I wouldn't be surprised if Riley Green ends up being the better player for a career, for sure. AL West is a toss-up. Mariners, Rangers, Astros, all in play. The A's, I think, will impress. The Angels will not. The Angels suck. I could see Seattle winning the division. Why they haven't signed any hitting, I do not know. That is the best rotation in baseball. It's better than the Dodgers. George Kirby, future Cy Young winner. Luis Castillo is great. Logan Gilbert is fantastic. And, oh, wow, Bryce Miller and Brian Wu in the back are studs. I mean, that rotation is just like, I don't even know how they do it. They got decent. I know they have Emerson coming up, the prospect. Another guy. Like, you know, it's like, where do they get these dudes from? Pitching, but they need hitting. They don't really got it. We'll have to see. The Rangers are, I think, the favorite. Another team, well, you know, is DeGrom going to stay healthy? We'll have to see. Few guys. Just going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to give you some random, just to close out, some hot takes for the MLB season. Number one, for all my Mets fans out there, Mark Vientos, down year. I think the hype on him is way too high. I will give you very briefly the reasons why I think he'll regress. His numbers weren't as good as he thought. The power was great. I believe he had 27 homers, only about 112 games. That's fantastic. But he strikes out way too much. He walks way too little. Those are bottom rates. He strikes out. His chase rate is horrendous. If you look at some of his bats, and I know he had a great playoff, so it gets overshadowed. But second half last year, he swung and missed like 34%. I think his K rate was 34%, ridiculously high. He's got to either make more contact, which usually means fixing your swing up a bit. Doesn't mean it's impossible. He's very young. I'm not saying he's not going to be good for his career. I just think this year will be a little not as good as people expect. He's getting a lot of hype. Or he's got to start hitting 40 homers a year. Like, if he's going to be a 40-homer guy, then you can have swing rates like that. But if you're not productive it's not good enough. When he hits it, it goes far. But he's got to get the whiff and chase rate down. He needs to retool a little bit. Someone that I'm high on, I know it's not a sleeper because everyone is Lawrence Butler. I think Lawrence Butler has a fantastic year in that minor league stadium. That's a Pee-wee stadium. I mean, he's going to be, I think, hitting 20, 25 homers. I think James Wood, again, not a secret top prospect, has a great year. I think Kyle Schwarber has another fantastic season this year. Jordan Westberg on the Orioles, who I did not discuss, another prospect. I mean, they got so many. It's like, I don't even know how you keep track with all those guys that are coming up. I think he'll have a fantastic year. C on some other guys. I thought that, speaking of, the only guys I can speak really confidently on, Red Sox. Nick Pivetta, I think, could be really good in San Diego. Better pitcher park. He strikes out a lot of guys, just the ERA won't get down. And just trying to think if there's any other takes. I really like the Mets. If anyone, for whatever reason, is listening to this that doesn't know, I live near the Mets, so very familiar with the Mets. I know the Mets, I think, way better than anyone who, like, if you're not a Mets fan, I'd say I know them pretty well, outside of anyone that's a Mets fan. I think the team is great. I think the lineup is great. I think the rotation's got serious concerns with those injuries. Kota Senga has pitched 3 of his 12 seasons over 150 innings. It's a bit concerning. I don't know that I trust that he's going to stay healthy this season. Again, the top of the lineup is not a problem. And Francisco Alvarez is hurt, which, not great. But again, if we're just quickly running through, I don't want to hate too much. The pitching staff is concerning. Senga, Peterson is going to regress. Peterson had under a 3 WAR line. We're going to go speed run this. Ended up with a 3.9. He ended up with under a 3 ERA last year, I believe. It was very low. His xERA and all of his basically his FIP, all those stats, way expected to be higher. So he was great, and it doesn't mean he won't be good. He is not going to be as good as he was last year statistically. It would be a huge statistical anomaly for someone to be that far away from their expected stats to real stats to do it twice, unless he actually gets better and his expected stats come down. Clay Holmes, I don't know. Maybe the Mets pitching factory will turn him out. McGill, I know Mets fans hate him. I don't see why he could be decent. And Griffin Canning, who I don't know too much about, former Angel. I know he's got an interesting pitch mix. See about him. The bullpen, Edwin Diaz is obviously the headliner. Bueto, good last year. They picked up AJ Minter from the Braves. Look at that. I just think I think Jeff McNeil is washed. I think Alvarez is a very important piece to this puzzle. I know he's hurt. I know he'll be back, but I think he's a very important piece of this puzzle. I think the top from Lindor to Soto to Alonso to Nimmo Vientos is really good. I think Winker is a good ad. I think Jose Siri is actually a good ad. He'll play great defense and he's fast as heck. But I do think there's some depth concerns. I know they got Marte, and we'll see if the little Acuna comes up. We'll see. But I think, long story short, the Mets are a candidate to miss playoffs this year. I think the Braves are the best team in the division. I think the Phillies are just... I think the Mets and the Phillies are similar. Obviously, the Mets screwed them up in the playoffs. Thank God. I hate the Phillies. I think there are some concerns on my end that the Phillies just have too much talent, which that leaves you in a wild card situation. Assuming that no one in the Central besides the Cubs that the division winner will say makes the playoffs. Let's say the Dodgers are the runaway. It's going to be Arizona, and it's going to be either San Fran, who I know people are saying is a sleeper team. I don't know that I think so, but I think the Padres could be good. So do I think the Mets will outwin the Padres and get that last spot? I do. Could the Mets win the division? Yeah. They could be great. The Mets have the potential to be the best team one of the best teams in baseball, but I think if they are I think they're a little hyped up, and I think if they regress to basically where I think they'll be, which is still a 90-win team. But what's crazy is that the Padres, I could see as an 85, 86-win team given the Mets challenge if the Mets don't stay healthy. And the Mets rotation needs to stay healthy. Needs to stay healthy. The guy who, Clay Holmes has never started. So hopefully he gives you innings, right? Same thing with that we were talking about with Garrett Crochet. I don't know if I mentioned this enough for the Red Sox, but Garrett Crochet has the stuff, right, to be a Cy Young winner. It's legitimate. His K per 9 is the highest, I think, in MLB history. His fastball is the fastest for any left-hand starter. His arm angle, he's 6'4", it's whack. His slider is wipeout. He's adding a sinker that when he threw last year basically was unhittable, and he's adding it. Again, we talked about the sinker in the Red Sox defense. The dude has pitched one season, and he got shut down early. Who knows if he's going to give you a full year? He pitched 130 innings last year. So I'm really high on Crochet this year. I think he's an ace. Would it shock me if he doesn't stay healthy the whole year, or if he has an injury, or if he just can't keep up with you? No. I mean, look at Houck was fantastic in the first half last year, and there was a point where I remember he was starting, and people were like, this is how many innings he's ever thrown, the most innings he's ever thrown in a season right now, and we were like midway through the season. And from there on out, he declined. I mean, undeniably was not as good. So there's going to be questions. If I had to give one flaming take for the season, I'll just be Red Sox friendly and say Garrett Crochet wins a Cy Young. I think Jonathan India has a fantastic season for the Royals. I think the Cubs win the division. I don't think that's a hot take, but I think it's pretty much no doubt. I think Chicago wins more games than people think. I think Chicago definitely outwins the Angels. I think that's about it. We'll have to see. Very excited for the season. Really excited to see a few guys that are kind of right on the premise of stardom, like an O'Neal Cruz and Ellie De La Cruz. They're just fun to watch, and we'll have to see. Thanks for listening, and for whatever reason you are listening to this, or still, that's crazy. And go Red Sox.